Hi, I'm Max Horseman. I'm an associate partner here at Trident, and you're locked into the Deal Room, a podcast where we break down all things enterprise sales within cyber. I have the pleasure to be joined by BJ Withrow today, who's had an illustrious career at Tenable and before that's included seeing him be a top performer more than once. So thank you for joining, BJ. How are you?
I'm doing great. Good to see you again, Max. Thanks for having me.
No, pleasure to have you, of course. And the topic for today is kind of winning enterprise deals at scale. I think the objective is to just break down, why BJ's been so successful over a lengthy tenure that's out of line with what I typically see in the market at Tenable, and some of the things that have helped him get there along the way. I think it would be really beneficial to an enterprise seller at any level. I'm sure you'll take something away from this conversation. I think a good place to start, BJ, is just you introducing yourself and your background for the audience today.
Yeah. Good afternoon. Good morning, everybody. It's great to meet you. Great to be on the podcast. My name is BJ Withrow, like Max was saying, and I'm a major account manager with Tenable. I live in Knoxville, Tennessee, and I handle just some of the large strategic accounts here at Tenable. And this is my 11th year with the firm.
Love that. And in terms of the journey, you've obviously had multiple roles at Tenable. I think just talk us through kind of where you started versus where you're at today.
Yeah. So, I've been a seller for now 20 plus years, and I really enjoy working with people. I love solving problems. And I've had a really great run here at Tenable these past 11 years. It's actually, I tell a lot of folks, it's been my dream job. Prior to coming to Tenable, I spent a lot of time in the telecommunications industry, in IT, selling networks, selling voice over IP, selling hosting. And I really wanted to get into the security space. I love the people, I love the culture, I love the technology. When we look at the world, IT and telecommunication is a very big space. But when you get into cyber, now it is changing, it is growing, but when you get into cyber, that culture is just a small fraction of what IT and telecommunications is. And there's a special group of people, it's a special culture, it has its kind of own language, if you will. And so I spent almost 14 years at Verizon, doing everything from being a direct sales manager to selling global accounts, to selling major accounts, to working in a territory. And when the opportunity came up for me to go into a cyber-specific role with Tenable, I was super excited. And I jumped at the opportunity to dig into the market. And so, for the past 11 years, I've been selling to, Fortune 100 accounts. And it's been very rewarding because every day it's something new. We're dealing with these large organizations with a lot of people, different cultures, different political structures, different power structures, different technology and different ways that they approach technology. And so there's always something new to learn. There's always something new, a new problem to solve for, some new challenge to overcome. And so it's been very rewarding, both mentally and financially.
Indeed. Yeah, that's definitely a fruit of your labor. And obviously, you had really significant successes early on. Like, what do you attribute to success, finding success as quickly as you did? You've talked about the Verizon background. I don't know how much that kind of came into it, but yeah, what do you attribute to those early successes and then consistent successes kind of moving through the years?
Yeah, I mean, this is a question that I get asked quite a bit. I've had an opportunity to be a mentor at some of the companies that I've worked with. I've been on a couple of different podcasts over the years, a couple of different interviews. And one of the things that people always want to know is, okay, what's the secret? How do you break into enterprise sales? How do you do, X, Y, and Z? And over the course of my career, you're going to laugh maybe when I say this, but I've probably gone through 100 different sales methodology training classes. And, every year someone has this new method where they're going to unlock the mysteries of the universe, and these large organizations are just going to come to you with open arms. And I've read probably 30 plus books on sales, and more than that around businesses, including listening to podcasts and things like that. But for me, Max, one of the things that has not changed through the entire time is me as a person. It doesn't matter what the logo is on the company that you're representing as a seller. What people really are drawn to are authentic people. They buy from people they like. They buy from people that they trust. And so I would say, from a very high level, there is no single magic bullet or methodology from a book that you will find that will unlock the mysteries of the universe. If you have anybody out there listening and you're a beginning seller, or you're looking to get into sales, or maybe you've been in sales for a long time, but you're just very frustrated because you're hitting the wall, I would say here's a couple of maybe takeaways from this podcast. If you hear anything else that would really serve you well, not only in your career, but as a human being. First of all, be yourself. Uh, One of my favorite quotes is by Oscar Wilde, and it goes something along the lines of, be yourself because everybody else is already taken.
Hmm.
We are flooded in a market right now with all kinds of slop, AI generated material, uh, you know, uh, emails that don't even sound like they've been written by humans. And I think people see through that and they're tired of it. If you can be authentic, if you have a voice, if you have an opinion, now you want to be careful not to be too crazy controversial with your opinions. You want to be professional. But if you approach your business and if you approach your market as a person who's looking to connect with other people, not just with prospects, I think you're going to shine out first and foremost among a sea of sellers who don't quite get that just yet. One of the biggest complaints I see on socials all the time is that, these people reached out to me on LinkedIn or some other platform, and as soon as we made a connection, they started selling me. And I think people just have a distrust for that, a dislike for that, and a distaste for that. See what you can do to understand what the other person is going through, just as a human being. I think that's paramount. And that will help you stand out. I think the second thing is that understand, if you are going into sales and if you are a seller, it really is about the long game. It's not about the one-time big hit. It's not about, that objective. If you're making a cold call, is to find an opportunity. You really have to understand that selling, if you're going to make it a career, is an endurance game. It's a long game. And think about it this way: the market that you serve does not have an infinite number of accounts or contacts. You have a finite number of prospects, a finite number of accounts, a finite number of relationships, and you're going to have to invest in those. Now, this is my personal opinion. You can take it or not, but I don't think that you can be a very successful seller, a husband, a wife, a coach, whatever, if you don't put in the time. I do see a lot of sellers who tend to jump from opportunity to opportunity when things get a little tough, or maybe something looks a little greener on the other side of the fence, and it's this constant churn in the business. And so I think buyers can sometimes be very leery of sellers who do that. And it's hard to become a subject matter expert if you're going from company to company, from different technology to different technology. And so be yourself, be authentic, look to connect with people, not just sell product. I know that sounds very cliched. And then put in the time that it takes, because it does take time. It takes a lot of work and it takes a lot of time.
That's all really helpful. And if there is any sales methodologies that you vouch for, we could include them in the comments. Obviously, there's a lot of noise out there, like you said. So if there's any actually that you think it's beneficial for someone to read, then we'll draw attention to that. But you just mentioned then, obviously the human element. You've obviously sold into some key enterprises, Fortune 100 accounts. How would you say that differs, if at all, to selling into, say, mid-enterprise, and what would the approach be to prospecting into accounts of that stature? Would it be more bottom up and getting in and leveraging stakeholders? I'm not trying to load the question, but yeah, how would the approach differ?
Yeah, so I think first of all, you need to understand your target audience. You need to know about the company that you're calling on. You can't just call blindly into companies looking for a decision maker for whatever product that you're representing and trying to solve. You need to understand who they are. You need to understand where they are in the market, what the competitive drivers are in the market. And then even before you go in the conversation, you need to kind of have a good understanding of, can I actually help them solve problems? sometimes you may get someone on the phone or in-person meeting and then only find out that it's too late, that you didn't really qualify what you were doing and that you're not a fit at all. Like they can't even use your product. So I think you need to understand who you're calling on. That's really important. But when it comes to the size of accounts, so there is a difference when you're talking about selling into like maybe Fortune 50 account as opposed to a small medium business. In a small medium business, the person who's using the tool could also be a champion. They could also be a coach. They could also be an economic buyer that holds budget. So in that instance, you really are going to be dealing with fewer people. Uh, Politics don't come into play as much. Within a large organization, you could be talking to not just one person, but an entire team. If you're selling a platform like what we do at Tenable, you're not just talking to one person or one team, you're talking to maybe 5 or 6 different teams, because the solutions that we have at Tenable cover a lot of different domains in the security space. In addition to that, you can't just work with the analysts, we call them the worker bees, or the guys that are in the trenches, the guys and gals that are in the trenches. I have this saying that we conduct an air war and a ground war in these large, massive environments. So the ground war would be, I'm in the trenches, I'm talking to the analysts, we're meeting them at local conferences, we're taking them to lunch and learns, we're educating them. And then the air war is where you really have to come in from the top. You have to know who the executives are, who owns the budget, and you have to start forming key relationships at the top. Both of those are crucial, because if you're selling a large solution, or if you're selling a complex solution or a platform, typically it's going to be more dollars. That means that the budgets could be spread across multiple people within the organization, or it could be up at the highest levels of the organization. And so you're going to have some kind of buy-in, some kind of relationship there. So the ground war and the air war is kind of the metaphors that I use when I'm going after the large organizations. And so that in a nutshell would be some of just the nuances or the differences that I would highlight just off the bat.
Yeah, that's really appreciated. And if we talk like multi-threading, is there a point that's too early to do that? Like, what point do you kind of get into tying things together and bringing different people in?
Yeah, I think there's an art to that, Max, and it's going to be account by account, honestly. You're going to have a good understanding of, first of all, do you have a champion in the account? If you're going after a most wanted account, a large enterprise account, it is critical that you find someone within the organization who's friendly, someone you can lean on their shoulder. Hey, off the record, Max, what's going on within the organization? What is their perception of me and our company? Can you tell me anything that's not, proprietary, that would get you in trouble? But can you help me understand who are the key players here? That's going to be really important. So you're gonna need to understand some of those nuances, and the best way to do that is to get a champion in there.
Yeah, and how important is it? We look outwards, right? Developing champions, etc. But you're selling into these key enterprises. Like, how do you keep a cohesive effort, on your side, the internal side, be that Tenable or any other organization? Like, how important is that, and how do you kind of manage that?
It's funny. Sometimes we call it herding the cats. Sometimes herding the cats internally in your own company is going to be way more difficult than it would be in a customer. So you're talking about multi-threading. So once you have that champion, going back to your first question, once you have that champion and you start developing that relationship, they will coach you on when to start bringing other people to the table. So that's going to be really key. And it'll be, sometimes you'll do that very quickly on, sometimes you'll do it later in the sales cycle. It'll be really dependent on the size of the deal, the complexity of the deal. When it comes to internally, one of the things that this is probably nobody else that's listening ever has to deal with this, but this is one of the things I struggle with. Like, I love the company I work for. I love the people that I work with. And so I think I take for granted that they have other things that they're working on, and my accounts aren't the most important thing to them. And
Every seller
so,
thinks that though, right?
right, my deal is the biggest and the best. And it's like, no,
Yeah.
there's always a bigger deal. There's always a better deal.
Mm,
They're always working on something that's very important, dare I say, more important than my deals. And
mm,
so I think when it comes to herding the cats internally, building that coalition internally, you have to start early in the process. And it depends on the culture of your company too, right? But you also have to have a lot of grace for the people that you work with. And what I mean by that is that if you're going to be in a spot for a while, you're going to be working with the same people for a year, 2 years. I've been working with some of the same people 11 years now. I cannot burn bridges, and everything cannot be an immediate emergency,
mm.
on this one deal,
Pick
because
your
guess
battles.
what? You have to pick your battles. And you have to have a little bit of grace and understand that they're working on other things too. And so you really have to engage those folks, those resources earlier, because if you wait till it's like, all right, here's our final presentation, they're going to
Mm,
make a decision in 2 weeks, it might be too late. So, and that's one of those things that can be very easy to forget. Same thing with a partner. Like if you're
mm.
selling through the channel, you got to understand when to bring the partner in too. Sometimes the partner will bring you into an account. Sometimes maybe you work on an opportunity and you bring it to fruition, and then you're like, "Oh snap! I should have brought the partner in, 3 weeks ago." So those all play a key part of the strategy there.
Yeah, 100%. And something, just going back to it, you kind of alluded to something there that I think is quite important for the audience. How do you go about picking a champion? I get sometimes it's going to be like, who've you got buy-in from? But like, is there such thing as a good or bad champion? You mentioned like they'll coach you on when to bring people into the mix. Well, that suggests that they really need an understanding of the best time to do that. So yeah, what makes a good and bad champion?
Yeah, and it's the art of reading people again too. Sometimes you may think you have a champion when in fact they're a blocker. It's very always kind of a delicate situation. If you have a raving fan in your account, whether they're a prospect or a customer, they want to move to your solution or they want to increase the size of your solution or whatever. Um, Sometimes their biggest fear is that you're going to talk to the executives and they're going to somehow lose power, or they want to control the message. And you've got to be very careful with that. First of all, you don't want to isolate your champion. You don't want to discourage them. You don't want them to turn against you. But also, if you've got a very large, complex project you're working on, you don't want to, unless you really trust them and you've worked with them for a long time, you don't want to hand over the messaging specifically and solely just to them. So you've got to understand, where does this person fit in the organization? How much juice do they really have? Can they influence, what we're trying to do here negatively or positively? And then from there, that's when you'll hopefully have a better understanding of, here's what I would say, Max. If you're concerned about going over your champion's head, that's where you work internally with your organization and bring in one of your executives. Hey, I want you to reach out to the CISO at company XYZ. It can't come from me. We're playing total dumb here. If you reach out to them, don't let me know, just on your time. Uh, we want to start forming those relationships. So
Mm.
that's really important too in large organizations, that you build those relationships at the top with your company and theirs, as well as some of the things that you're doing.
Yeah, okay, that's another interesting question. We're diverting a bit from the kind of agenda here, but exec sponsorship, we hear a lot about it in early stage vendors. Is that still that still plays the same level of part at an organization the scale of Tenable, then bringing in the execs?
Yeah, 100%. We have, I don't know if this is, I think this is unique, but again, I'm biased because I've been at Tenable 11 years now. Our culture is pretty fantastic. It's a open door. You can go in and talk to the CEO. We have two CEOs, Steve Vance and Mark Thurman. Their door is always open. You can walk in anytime. They'll go talk to any customer, regardless of the size. And it's that way from the top all the way down across our engineering, across the products. And that is very special. And even within our own CRM platform, anytime we have a deal that's over a certain threshold, it must contain an executive sponsor. And one of the mantras that we have, and this is a good one too, regardless of where you work at, is that we never lose alone and we always win together. That's something that I would advise young sellers, to embrace. Early on in my career, I saw a lot of sellers who would never get their sales manager or director involved in anything that they were doing. And I think the fear was that the director was going to come in and take over the sales process, or they were going to inspect their business too much, or they were going to be micromanaged. And nobody likes that. But I tried to make it my point that whenever my director saw me, he ran the other way, because he trusted me. He knew what I was doing. He's like, you don't need me. You've got this.
Yeah.
And if we lost a deal, there wasn't like this deep inspection, like me on the hot seat. It was like, I'm intimately involved. You've had me involved from the very beginning. Now, obviously you can't do that on every deal, but if you're working a large deal, maybe large 6-figure deal, something like that, whatever you deem large, you want to involve more people. You want their expertise and their advice and their help.
Yeah, I completely agree. I couldn't resonate more with that. And then I think that a lot of sellers get in the trap, of trying to build pipeline. It's so aggressive now with everyone wanting, a 4x pipeline. And I think a lot of the issue is that often, people are almost lying to themselves about what their pipeline or the health of their pipeline actually is. So there's obviously value in being able to qualify opportunities out as well as in. Like, can you shed any light on kind of a process around that, or any triggers or red flags that arise that kind of make you go, no, I'd actually walk away from this. This isn't worth spending all my credit on, internally, and all of that.
Oh, that's a great question, because sellers would never lie about their pipeline. They would never overinflate it.
Of course not.
Never. But I am militant about this, Max, and maybe I'm the exception and not the norm. But I try to get something. First of all, when I'm prospecting, I think this is really important. Prospecting can be a destructive process to your soul, because it's a high touch activity with a lot of rejection. People aren't responding to your emails. People are hanging up on your phone calls. Those kind of things.
Sounds like recruitment.
Sounds like recruitment. Yeah. So
weird.
So you have to reset your expectations. Like, if your expectation is every time I get on the phone call, I'm going to uncover an opportunity, I think you're setting yourself up for failure. If you're playing the long game, this goes back to the first comment I made, but if you're playing the long game, when you're in your prospecting, I think a healthy objective is, I'm going to gather information. I want to know more about this organization. Maybe I just talked to John in IT, and I'm going to take John's information down. Who do you report to, John? And what's the level of the organization? Oh, you work for Max. Maybe next time I call back, hey, I'm calling for Max. I talked to John. You're building that rapport off of the information that you're getting through your prospecting. When it comes to building pipeline, of course, there's all these metrics that we've had in the industry forever, 2x, 4x, 10x, whatever. But I would say you're doing yourself a horrible disservice if you keep carrying deals in your pipeline that have zero chance of closing. Clean it out, get rid of it, free yourself. It is like a weight around your neck to see that thing in there in Salesforce for 475 days that you've been forecasting to close for the last 4 years.
So do you think that often it's a rep almost like lying to themselves? They kind of deep down know. Or do you think it's an issue if they haven't done enough discovery, or they haven't, actually identified any red flags that exist?
I can't speak for every salesperson, but I know for me personally that we can get sucked into doing things that make us look like we're very busy and we're doing a lot of work, whether it's responding to emails or we're filling an RFP. But at the end of the day, prospecting is one of the most important things that we can do. And understanding that if you put in the work, it does take time, but it will come. You have to follow the process. You have to believe in the process. And what I see happening is people just don't want to do the work. it's very difficult. And so they'll put it off as long as they can. And as a result of that, their pipeline won't be where it needs to be. So if they were to go in and close out those deals, Max, that were 200 days old, their pipeline will be nothing. Then what would they have to report? But in the long term, they're just delaying the inevitable. Those people who do that repeatedly will be at a different company in 6 months, or they'll be on performance plan, or they just won't enjoy the work. But if you can get to that mindset of, I've got a block on my calendar every Thursday for 2 hours to prospect, or every Tuesday and Thursday, or whatever, and you do that over and over and over again, it will work. The pipeline will grow. Results will happen, but it does take time.
And when it comes to qualifying opportunities out, have you ever had a situation where, from a credibility standpoint, you walking away from a deal saying to a client or whatnot, a prospective customer, actually, we're not best suited to deliver on this, has kind of had some knock-on effect that's beneficial, other than just your time?
Absolutely. I use that. There's one of my favorite tools. And when I tell people that I use it, they're shocked. I've had some deals of all sizes that have been in the pipeline for a long time. And I've reached out to the customer, and either they're sparse in replying back, or they just go dark on me. And so one of the things that I like to do, I think this might be a Zig Ziglar thing, where you offer the customer something, then you take it away from them. And at that point, you'll really understand if they're serious or not. So this happened to us last week. We've had a customer, longtime customer of ours, and they've been saying, we want to meet to talk about X, Y, and Z. These are 3 big initiatives we have. Every time we try to schedule the meeting, they don't respond. And so finally, I came back and said, just very bluntly, no response. Can we move to something else? In the title of my email. And I just said, hey, I know you guys are super busy. I'd like to move away from these discussions right now and work on other things with the other accounts. When it becomes a priority, let me know, and we can get back together anytime. I just don't want to continue to bother you with these emails and these requests. What was great is almost immediately he came back and said, I'm so sorry. We've been very busy. We've got X, Y, and Z going on. These are very important to us. Let's get on the calendar. That's just one example, but I've done that with quotes, where we've had quotes that have expired. Hey, this quote's expired. We've been talking about this for 3 months. You haven't gotten back with us. I'm going to go ahead and close this for now. And I'm putting it back in their court. Sometimes they come back and say, yeah, we're never going to do this. Or
you've given them a way out.
I've given them a way out, but also it's very telling. If they come back and say, great, we didn't want to hurt your feelings, but we're never going to do this. Great. I can close it and I'm free. I don't have to sit around hoping and praying that this will come in. But the reverse is also true too. Sometimes customers will come back and go, no, we need to get on this, and it speeds up the process.
No, I totally agree. There's a lot of similarities in recruitment and enterprise sales. Let's see that. We've covered actually a lot of the things that I wanted to cover. I think in terms of a summary, what do you think the biggest mistake enterprise sellers make then from all the above that we've covered? And I know you can only speak from your experience, but you'll have seen a lot of people come into Tenable and etc. and beyond. So yeah, is there any kind of say that you have there?
Yeah, I think two overall mistakes that I see people make. The first one is not giving enough time. It is a long game. Selling is it can be a very exciting, rewarding, fulfilling career, but it does take a lot of work. And so you definitely need to come in with the mindset of an endurance athlete. I'm going to put in the work. I'm going to do good reps. And eventually I will see results. I'm not going to get, shredded for the beach if I only do, one session of yogas or Pilates. It's going to take a long time, or running, or whatever your exercise is. Same thing with sales. That's one big mistake. People just give up too soon. And they don't set realistic goals for themselves. You've got to have baby steps. You've got to have objectives that you can reach, because that makes you feel good about the work that you're doing. When you're making the cold call, don't always make it about closing a deal on the call. Make it about a smaller bite-sized objective. so that you can walk away and feel good about the work that you're doing. The second thing is that they view other people in customers and prospects as somehow magical or different than themselves. The people that we're calling on, they could be the CEO of the largest company in the world, or it could be the smallest company in the world, or it could be an engineer that you're calling on. They could be really smart, really wealthy, whatever. But at the end of the day, they're people just like us. And I see a lot of sellers, especially young sellers, get very intimidated about having discussions, not knowing what to say, and that sometimes can get them into trouble. Either they don't talk to those people where their competitors are, forming those relationships and closing deals and things like that, or they just take it to a place where maybe they shouldn't. So again, it kind of goes back to what we talked about when you opened up the call and just asked me. Be yourself. See people as people. Treat them the way you want to be treated. Don't sell products. See if you can uncover problems. And then you'll make friends for life if you do that.
Yeah, 100%. And you're probably one of the more humble sellers that I've met along the way in a 9-year recruitment career. But nonetheless, your accolades include being a top global performer. Is there any silver bullet? And again, it's not a loaded question, but you get great enterprise sellers, but then you get top 1%. Is there anything that you see that makes a great enterprise seller a 1% enterprise seller or a top global rep?
Yeah, more protein and creatine. I would say creatine.
Yeah. Do the reps, basically.
The creatine. No, all the guys and gals that I've had the pleasure of running into over the years who've been top in their game, they have the ability to work with people. They have really good, I guess you'd say, emotional intelligence. Where they may not know everything inside and out about the product. You don't have to be a technical engineer or a genius to be a good seller. That's another mistake that I see people making. You want to know the product. You want to be able to take the marketing and the messaging that your company gives you, and you want to be able to internalize it, and then you want to be able to share it in your own words. That's where the power comes from. You need to believe in what you're doing. But the top sellers that I've had the privilege of rubbing elbows with and being mentored by have had the same things in common. They're good with people. They're good at problem solving. They ask really, really good questions. And they don't just stop at 1 or 2 questions. They ask a lot of questions. They seek to understand. And then they're really good at bringing resources to the table. It's, internally, like you asked about within their own company, but also bringing together kind of a grassroots initiative within the organization, especially if it's a really complex sell. You're going to need the ability to tie all those pieces together if you're going to be successful.
Love it. Listen, BJ, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on today. I think we've unpacked a lot of value that I've taken away from it personally. So I'm sure the audience will agree. So yeah, thanks for joining.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. One of the things you asked me about was resources. There is one book that I read early in my career that I thought was pretty helpful. It's called How to Be a Rainmaker. And very simple, very straightforward, understanding the situation that a customer's in, identifying a problem, looking at the implications of that problem, and then what could you help to solve that need, and what would be the result of that. It's a very simple framework, but it goes back to problem solving. But I'd love to hear back from your audience too in the comments. What blogs do you read? What books are you reading? I'm sure there's probably things out there, podcasts that I haven't listened to that would help me, where I might be jaded to listening to another podcast or another book on selling.
100%. You've took me right back there, because spin selling was the first methodology I learned in
there you go
at Console Partners. But yeah, look, I appreciate you, BJ. We'll catch up soon. Thanks for your time.
Thank you so much, Mac. Have a great day, Max.